Hi. So what this video is about is I wanted to talk about comprehension and what we are able to comprehend as human beings. So one thing that I would like to put out there is that if you look at modern day people, they really exemplify or they idealize these heroes, right? They idealize these heroes like Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi and Malcolm X and Angela Davis and Audre Lorde and JFK and whomever, and they like to really say like, wow, like I'm going to post something on Facebook, right, that exemplifies what a hero this person is, right? But meanwhile, we always need to look at what we ourselves are doing as individuals. So let's just say that you are safely in your bubble, your bourgeoisie bubble of protection, right? Where you get to live your life of leisure and you get to live your life of not having to take risks, not having to take emotional risks necessarily. We don't always hold each other accountable or push one another for taking emotional risks, because if I push you, you might push me. So therefore there's kind of like an unwritten agreement in modern day civilization, right? We're such a civilized culture. We don't really push one another to have emotional conversations and really do that deep work of emotional work. So in general, we kind of like live like vultures, really, where we live off of the tragedy and the suffering of people who've been real freedom fighters, right? So we might put them like on a cool shirt that sells like a million copies of that shirt or a million sales of that shirt. And we might put them on our purses or our backpacks like these leaders, right? Or we might post something about them on Facebook. But we aren't really ready personally to do that work ourselves. We aren't really ready to take advantage of the fight that's available to us, and really do that fighting ourselves. We're more of like a culture of people that piggyback on other freedom fighters and maybe use them in a glamorized fashion, like to sell Nike shoes or something, which are made by child slave labor in China. And then the pollution drifts over to us on the West Coast via the trade winds or what have you, right? And then we have unbelievable air pollution here on the West Coast that basically is attributable to the lack of air quality enforcement in China. So we kind of, unfortunately, are contributing to the illusion of rebellious revolutionaries having a place in society, because we're using them almost as a sales gimmick, almost like something that's cool and rad, but we ourselves wouldn't be arrested for that. We ourselves wouldn't be caught in the streets, being chained to a tree trying to save a redwood. We're going to stay safely in our home watching the Kardashians or what have you, right? We're going to stay safely in our home watching whatever the latest TV show is. And then we will post a picture about Gandhi, or we'll post a picture about MLK on our Facebook, and we'll kind of pat ourselves on the back, like, oh, I'm a real revolutionary, I'm a real rebel, right? I posted that picture of Gandhi and I posted that picture of Malcolm X. Like, no, you're really not a rebel, and really you're kind of a safe, passive scaredy cat, right? You're really not doing much with your life in terms of taking those risks yourself. So when I look at like the Brits that decided to revolt with Gandhi, whether you believe Gandhi was a setup from the British autocratic society, which some people have alleged as well. I mean, I think there's always information behind information, so I think it's easy to idealize Gandhi without actually doing a lot of research on the British government or who is in control beyond the British government. So I'm not here to say that Gandhi is the end-all be-all, but when I look at photographs of Gandhi with the Brits that decided, you see these white women, right, standing with this man, and these were Brits that were accustomed to power, accustomed to privilege. They were the white upper class, right? They benefited from colonization. These people were basically their slaves, right, the nice brown people. And then you look at the Brits and they're standing next to Gandhi, right? These fat, chubby, nice, like older white women in some of these like old photographs. And you see that these women are standing up against their peer group. They're standing up against the rich and wealthy upper class, sort of like in South Africa when you talk about apartheid. They're standing up and saying, the money's not worth it. The benefits, the wealth are not worth it, because we're paying a price here with our souls to be part of a process, just as I believe people in the West pay a price with their souls to be part of a process that is unequal for all. So anytime there's inequality, you can argue that it's true or not, but I believe you pay the price for the people that are not where you are. You karmically or energetically or psychically or something, you bear the price of that blood being on your hands. And so by taking this position of being the top dog in society and not fighting for those who are not able to be where you are at, I literally think that there are repercussions to that. And in addition, these women, in this one instance, when we're talking about India and we're talking about Gandhi and we're talking about fighting the British, that literally these women, when I look back at these photographs, they're willing to stand there with Gandhi. They're willing to be there in the streets and receive being ostracized and receive rejection from their peers. And so it's so strong of a message, because I don't really think we have that in modern day times. We don't have people that are willing to risk. You know, we have people that pretty much, they hedge their bets and they kind of see, like, is it worth my while? And they kind of see, like, well, is everyone else doing it? Like, if everyone else is doing it, like, I'll jump on the Bernie bandwagon, right? If everyone else is doing it, I'll question the establishment. But they themselves aren't necessarily motivated to say, I'm going to risk, and I'm going to risk the establishment, and I'm going to risk being persecuted because I believe in justice that much. And so you really don't have people inflamed with that spirit of fighting justice. You really don't see that in modern day times. And it's really sad, and you feel that sense of, like, wow, even the revolts that you see, even the rejections of the authority that exists in modern day times, a lot of times that's not really individuals that are turning against that. You'll see like groups or waves of people, which really lends itself to that sheep mentality, which says people basically cannot operate by themselves. You as an individual, I as an individual, we are handicapped. We are unwilling to operate or act on our own volition, to do it ourselves because we care that much. We are consumed with society's rejection of us. We are consumed with whether we are rejected or whether we are accepted or whether we are applauded or whether we are worshipped. And we really are after that satiation that comes from, I'm really accepted, or I'm really valued, or, you know, these kind of false beliefs around, it's almost like false idols. We believe that we should be popular, and it's almost like a curse. You know, we should be popular to the point where we don't stand up for people. We should be popular to the point where we don't stand up to ourselves. We should be popular to the point where we don't stand up to any government. You know, these are not healthy things. So you really condition the populace to only operate when they're in kind of that sheep herd mentality, and basically you basically kind of stymie or stop any kind of individual who might change the system. You basically eradicate the possibility of anyone kind of sprouting up with some new ideas, like some fresh new ideas. A person that stands up and says, I'm going to be different from the rest of y'all. I have no interest in being a sheep like the rest of y'all. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to fight the establishment, you know, F the rest of y'all. I'm going to do it myself. And you really just don't see that nowadays. You really see people that are very much in that herd and sheep mentality, where even if they're going to be part of a revolution, they're being part of a revolution from that herd and sheep mentality, which is, oh, is my neighbor doing it? Oh, is my other neighbor doing it? Oh, okay, now it's safe. Now it's safe. Oh, is my auntie doing it? You know, but like for you on your own to stand up for yourself and to say, I'm just not down with this. Like this is not part of what I believe in. I'm going to stand up and fight this. You see very few individuals that on their own are willing to come to that conclusion. And it just speaks to kind of this herd mentality that we have in the US. And one example I'll give is that they've done studies, and if someone falls down on the sidewalk and they get hurt, that person is more likely to get help if there's another person on the opposite side of the sidewalk, opposite side of the street, who's an individual by themselves. And what they've shown through these studies is that the people, when there's more people that are literally like 4, 5, 6, 7 people standing around, nothing gets accomplished, and that person dies, right? Like, let's say the person's having a heart attack. That person friggin' dies, right? Because we're just so much in this moron mentality of like, oh, should you call the police? Oh, should I call 911? Oh, what are you going to do? Like, oh, I don't want to step on your toes. Like, meanwhile, the person's dying, right? Because we're so much part of this sheep mentality that we're not really able to say, like, listen, I'm going to call 911 and I'm going to call the police. Like, I don't know what you're going to do, but I'm going to go do CPR. Like, you go call the police now. Like, we really need these directives, right? And a lot of times with first aid, they'll with the training, they'll tell you like you need to give people directions. And my question is always like, it's unfortunate that people are so dumbed down and so stupid at this point in human history, and so much a part of this like sheep mentality that literally you have to kind of like treat them like children and literally be like, okay, like you, I need you to go call 911. Okay, and you have permission from everyone here. So don't feel bad doing something by yourself because you're a big boy and you can do that, right? Like, what does that really say about us as a culture? Like, that's terribly tragic that we're so dumbed down in terms of our communication style and our ability to think autonomously and think for ourselves and act autonomously and not be dependent upon others for validation. It's really, really sad. So the other thing I wanted to speak about as far as the herd mentality goes, or just how we think about consciousnesses in general, is that a lot of times I think we immortalize, and I really want to hone in on that word immortalize, because we really get hung up on these people from the past, right? We don't get hung up on people from the present, right? I think we tend to hang on to the past. So we say, you know, Gandhi, wow, you know, let's get some Gandhi shirts out there and some Gandhi, you know, t-shirts and some Gandhi hats and some Gandhi plates. So we immortalize these people, right? We deify them. Same for MLK Jr. and same for Malcolm X and so forth. So we deify them and we immortalize them, but we never ask ourselves like, well, why don't we have any of these people now? Why are we so into worshiping the past? Like, why don't we have any people standing up and fighting now? Maybe because those people were murdered, and so we kind of subconsciously take in that we potentially could be facing murder if we should ever stand up and fight like these people stood up and fight, right? And again, who murdered them? Potentially our government. So in reality, like, do we really feel that comfortable standing up? It's much easier to pretend like our government's a democracy. It had nothing to do with the assassinations of the civil rights leaders that we idealize and immortalize for all of history. I don't think we always connect the dots. And that's another thing I'm going to speak to later in this video. But in terms of connecting the dots, I don't think we always connect the dots. I think we kind of say like, we're going to immortalize Gandhi. We're going to immortalize Malcolm X. We're going to immortalize MLK Jr. and idolize these people, glamorize them, immortalize them, you know, idolize the struggle, glamorize the struggle as if it were an easy struggle, right? We're going to glamorize it. We're not actually going to do it ourselves because we're too comfortable in our modern day living to actually do this ourselves now. But we're going to glamorize it and hold them up as deities almost. But we're not actually going to connect the dots of like, well, who ordered the killing of them? Like if the FBI ordered the killing of MLK Jr., what does that say about the FBI? Because that's, you know, a portion, an arm of the United States government. So basically that's your government murdering your civil rights leaders that you're holding up from, you know, from here until eternity as being these change agents. So it's a very strange dichotomy for people to hold inside their brain, which is, I'm not going to fear my government, but I'm not going to become a civil rights leader like these people because these people were, they were taken out. You know, they were murdered. They were offed. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. They were assassinated, right? So for us to kind of connect the dots, like, oh, civil rights leader, civil rights leader. I don't want to become a civil rights leader because they get murdered. Oh, but it's my government. Oh, I trust my government. I can trust my government. But my government basically ordered the killing of these people that we immortalize and idealize and glamorize for all of, you know, the rest of humanity. But we're not going to talk about that, right? We're just going to talk about the good times, right? The good times, the marches, people having fun, getting shit passed, right? We're just going to talk about that. We're not going to actually talk about the fact that these people were murdered, right? They were murdered. And JFK and Bobby as well, like when we talk about these people, they were murdered. And so I think that sends a really strong message to anyone who believed in these people, which is if you stand up like these people, you will be murdered, right? But we don't actually address that. We don't have the guts to address that. So we just kind of, for the most part, I think society just kind of says like, oh no, there's just like a random shooter and they just happened to take them out right when they were going to like fight the big banks or something, or question the Titanic. You know, the Titanic is a very interesting one in terms of the Federal Reserve. Like, it's always interesting the timing of these murders. Like, oh, it just happened that the Titanic went down. It just happened, you know, it's like, well, what was going to happen with the people that were on board with the Titanic and who was questioning the Fed at that point? Like the Federal Reserve, like, and truly looking at the Federal Reserve. Like, I don't think people really want to waste their brain power on those activities. I think a lot of times people just kind of want to accept information in these little doses, but they don't actually connect the dots. So we're really good at like collecting, like this is the number 2 and this is the number 5, and I'm collecting this information, this is the number 10, but I'm not actually going to add these all together to come up with like my own conclusion, which is like, oh, we're fucked, right? Like I'm adding this plus this plus this, like, oh my god, they're really controlling everything, or wow, this really, it's much more insidious than I would have believed otherwise. So an interesting thing for me is that we, as the bourgeoisie who are watching our TVs in our sheltered homes, who are not taking to the streets and who are not chaining ourselves to trees and so forth, we don't want to do the work of the people from our past. We don't want to do the work that was entailed. There was like some really hard soul work, soul searching. I'm going to give it everything I've got. I don't care what. I'm going to risk everything. I just don't think we have that kind of commitment. We don't have that kind of chutzpah. We don't have that kind of drive, that ambition to change the system. You know, we kind of want to change the system from a safe place in our homes where we press like on something, or we, if there's a petition, we just sign our names online, you know, while we're eating our bonbons in bed with our little foo-foo like French doggies. Like this is kind of the modern day revolutionary, right? From the Western world, you're sitting there with your French poodle, right? Your Bichon like water spaniel, but you're not actually going to be doing the work in the streets. You don't want to lose your friends or be socially shunned or be uncomfortable. We've really taught that it's very important that we not lose friends, because if we lose friends, then somehow it's a terrible thing. And if we become socially shunned, that's a terrible thing. But people have survived worse, you know? Or they might be uncomfortable. You might be uncomfortable if you actually raise your voice up and actually try to challenge the system, right? You might be uncomfortable. And I think we are creatures of comfort. We've been really taught to be like these fat cows in society and get your milk and sit in front of your TV and eat your bonbons. Like we're really into satiation. If you really look at Western culture, it's very much a society that's very big on satiation.